This is TWiT.
So, Paul, you want to kick us off with the top story, the Intel blockbuster news?
Yeah, apparently they announced new GPUs. Everyone's been looking forward to these, and dear God, I'm just kidding. Who cares? So,
what is the big news?
Yeah. Well, yeah, apparently on Sunday, the Intel board of directors gave Pat Gelsinger a no-win situation. You could retire or we'll just fire you. So
yeah, because he said he retired as of right now.
Yeah. I mean,
which usually is the sign, right?
Yeah, a real retirement has a replacement in place, you know?
Yeah. I have a cardboard box with all my things in it, and I'm retiring. Bye-bye.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is actually, I think it is kind of sad because Gelsinger was brought in just a few years ago. He is a designer. He's been there. He was under Andy Grove back in the day. He's an engineer, knows Intel's business, and charted, I think, the proper course, which is separating this. And this is what Ben Thompson's been talking about all the time on Stratechery, this integrated business into Fab and Foundry. But I guess it wasn't moving fast enough for the board.
Well, I don't think he's the one capable of doing it. It's a disruptor's play. Right.
Yeah.
And really, there's only two outcomes here for Intel. Actually, there's one outcome. They get dismantled.
Yeah.
You're going to get dismantled. Are you going to keep the name or not? That's it.
He seemed to think that, Intel was better together, right?
Yeah.
But
that's
I also
the argument,
wonder.
Right?
Yeah, I think we're going to learn more about this over time. I don't think we've seen the full story here yet. I think Bloomberg, somebody reported that this transition this recovery was happening more slowly than hoped for. But yeah, I mean, Intel made some major strategic mistakes over the years that led to such things as, Apple choosing ARM for its iPad, which, that could have been an Intel business.
Incidentally, we talked about this yesterday on MacBreak Weekly. What a brilliant move it was for Apple to say, hey, we got to find something besides Intel. The same thing they did with PowerPC in years past.
Yeah.
There was an interview with the chairman, or not an interview, it was his autobiography, the chairman of TSMC, who said, we started this conversation in 2011 with Apple.
Yeah. No, I mean, Intel, from my perspective on the Windows side of the fence, the big Intel crime, which has been ongoing for 20 years, is ignoring repeated pleas from Microsoft mostly to create more efficient CPUs for computers, to make these things over time more device-like. Yeah, they did. And that sort of proves my point.
Yeah.
The low power chips they made are and were, garbage. So that was the beginning of Apple's transition away from Intel. Intel, compared to the Power PC consortium, like the Motorola, IBM, whatever it was at the time, was well done and the right move at the time. But then Apple saw that Intel wasn't keeping up with where it wanted to go.
Yeah.
Look,
I think
Microsoft hasn't been
analysis
successful
on this, that you needed the mobile market to justify the cost to modernize your fabs, right?
Yeah.
To go to extreme
Intel
ultraviolet,
tried.
which is incredibly expensive.
No,
but
did they?
didn't
They
really.
did scale, right? But scale failed.
Yeah.
They
you
walked
gotta sell
away from
billions for that to make sense. And you're not selling it.
They tried to get it. They had wireless chipsets for a while. They had ARM chipsets, by the way, for a while.
Yep.
Which I think was Xscale a ARM chipset or not? I don't remember. Maybe not. They tried different things, but it was always kind of half-hearted. They were always like, look, more megahertz. The biggest innovation that they've had in the past decade, most likely, was their, move from 2 to 4 cores for the base core chipsets, which was nice because it didn't impact the battery life at all, but not so nice.
They only
went
multi-core back in 2000 because the P4 was such a disaster, right? And it was the Israeli mobile chipset. Their version of the P3 was outrunning the P4 anyway.
Yeah, no,
so that's where Core Duo came from.
Right. So look, at least they had something to fall back on. They owned this little company in Israel. They had a good new architecture. It worked. They got lucky, but they got outmaneuvered by AMD with the move to 64 bits.
Yep.
We're embarrassed by and enraged by the fact that Microsoft adopted x64, and then they had to put it into their own chips, which didn't like to see that. But then the next 20 years happened. I mean, they just haven't kept up. And
The irony is the board probably cares more about Intel being kicked off the Dow than any of that.
Well, I mean,
right.
it is.
You pretty got to fire the guy who got you kicked off the Dow.
Yeah, that's like.
But
okay, Pat.
But was he, or was it not his predecessor or two? Right, that
well,
led
the thing.
to this.
He was.
I mean,
this is a few years ago.
he adopted a mess, right?
Yeah. And
so maybe you guys will have a better example than I do. But the only thing I can think of that's like this, where once proud big company failing in a big way,
IBM.
and they bring in a fixer. Nokia with Stephen Elop,
Yeah.
and Yahoo with Marissa Mayer.
Yeah.
And in both cases, those did not go well.
No.
Yahoo was sold to Verizon. Could have probably succeeded as a smaller company, but didn't. And then Nokia. What happened to Nokia? Nothing. They're gone. So no, I mean they're still around, but who cares? So look, this is what happens sometimes. You get disrupted, but the parallels between Microsoft and Intel are super strong. Microsoft had this other thing to turn to when what used to be their primary business started stagnating and then declining, which was in their case the cloud. And Intel should have and could have made that transition as well, and didn't. And they weren't there for mobile, and they're not there for IoT. And remind me what else is that's everything.
No,
so
AI. They missed AI now,
which is data center / yes. I mean, right now, Intel is still through inertia the big fish in the smallest of platform ponds there is, the PC, and that market's not going anywhere. I mean, it's just sorry,
Their approach, which is the vertical integration approach, makes sense because they started it. Right? They basically invented this business back in the 70s and 80s. But vertical integration only makes sense if you are continuously innovating.
Yeah.
And the one thing you can't say about Intel is they've been innovating.
Is that what happened really is they got out innovated? Is that really bottom line?
Well, because they haven't innovated at all, right? They're really just keep on
tried.
this.
I just said 4 cores. How is that not invent? No. So no, just kidding.
You could argue the troubles go back to titanium, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And they were saved by the little Israeli skunk works.
Yeah, the P3 guys.
The core guys.
Well,
said,
first
hey,
they were
they were
forced by Microsoft essentially to adopt that.
Yeah, but Dave Cutler wrote his Windows on Windows paper that basically said this is the way.
Yep.
And that was the end of that debate. Nobody argued.
That was my entry into this world. Well, one of my entries, I guess, was in 1998. I went to what was then the NT 5.0 Beta 2 workshop in Seattle. And I asked Yusuf Mehdi, who was on stage setting up or whatever at the time before the show, or before the event, hey, where's Dave Cutler? And he was working on, he said, 64-bit stuff. And I was like, 64-bit stuff. And at the time it was digital, what was the digital chip? Oh boy, I can't remember. Well, digital before they were acquired was where it had a 64-bit chip. It was one of a few that Microsoft was looking at, Titanium.
Is it
I know. Is that
the Alpha?
Alpha, that's it.
Yeah.
Alpha. Yes, thank you.
Well, because the old NT before Windows 2000 supported Intel, Alpha,
PowerPC,
MIPS, and PowerPC, right?
Yep.
With the hardware.
Yeah, no, it was multi-architecture. Even the software itself, the front end was multi-architecture. It was supposed to have multiple personalities. It was a POSIX environment, OS2 environment, Windows environment. And then by the time it kind of came out, they were like, well, Windows. But it was always designed to be this thing, this thing that was not what Windows was. And then it became Windows. But I don't know. I don't know what. There are too many missed opportunities here for Intel. And too many times
they got punished every time they tried to innovate, right? Like the Titanium was a train wreck.
Yeah, but that was just a bad design. I mean,
I'm with you. But the other spin on this is every time we try and paint outside the x86 lines, we get spanked for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the, I'm going to get the story a little bit wrong, but at the time, there was a Microsoft engineer who had gone to Intel. They were working on the Titanium stuff, and they said, hey, how long do you think it will be before this will be small enough that we could put it inside a laptop? And they were like, oh, it's never going to be that small.
That's not a thing.
They were like, that will never happen.
Why would you ever want 64 bits?
And then they're
laptop?
like,
that's crazy.
why are we working on this then? I don't understand. Like, that should be the point, right? The world at that time they could see was heading toward, mobility. And that's really been the thing for Intel. I think it's been a lack of mobility or, their inability
companies failed over that, right? That missed the switch to mobile. and by missing that, really missed the next generation of computing.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this deeper point that Thompson made about how much it costs to switch to extreme ultraviolet, and that unless you've got 1 billion chips to sell, it's just not worth it.
That's what TSMC did, right?
And that's what TSMC got by winning that contract.
Right. But see, the big difference not the big, one of the many differences is that Intel was going to...
Can you blame Apple?
No, they
went for the best chip they could buy.
Right.
Yeah, no, they did the right thing. That's not the issue. For Intel, though, Pat Gelsinger plan, like Leo, I believe it was the right approach for the company given the kind of cards he was handed. The one issue I see one of the issues I keep saying one of the issues I see is that Intel would have been put in this position where they were partnering with their competitors, right? For this thing to work, its competing chip makers, designers would have to come to it to build their chips. That's not true of companies like TSMC. I mean, I guess it's technically true of Samsung, but that's an awkward position, like to be like, hey, AMD, hey, buddy, how would you like to give us your designs? And we could, we could make them for you. You're like, oh, I don't know. That doesn't sound safe. Like, like, oh no, there's a Chinese wall. I mean, it's just, maybe those need to be separate companies, right? And when you look at Intel as it is today and you split it into those two obvious halves, it's pretty obvious which has the bigger potential. It's the foundry business, assuming they can get it right. And that's the company that, the part of the company that got the chips, award and is the future of this thing. So there's a lot of talk now about getting the platform right, meaning x86, but that's a small thing. I mean, fundamentally, it's the bigger thing is the foundry. And so much investment, so much money, and I don't know that they're ever going to get there.
No. And so then the question is, you're going to cut up the business. The question is, are you going to do this, in 1980s junk bond style, where literally just going to sell it off for parts?
Right.
Or are you going to is there some piece that's going to hang onto the name? Is the name valuable still?
Yeah. And what you're describing is not a technical discussion or issue.
And it's why you have the wrong CEO.
It's just business,
A professional corporate finance CEO needs to take charge and make serious financial decisions about the assets that are left.
I'm in this business or this industry because I care about technology. I care about the hardware and the software and all that stuff, right? But because, I've been around for a long time, you have to deal with the company side of it, the business. I report on earnings every quarter for multiple companies. And I can tell you just like kind of anecdotally from my own perspective, you don't hear a lot from the board of directors unless something has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Those guys are like a shadow society. Right. Like in other words, they're like the star chamber in the background. Yeah. No, but for them to come out publicly, for you to actually get quotes from chair people.
Yeah.
Oh, something has hit the iceberg.
Yeah.
Like it is just, it's
CEO
bad.
is supposed to be the representative of the company.
Yep.
The board is supposed to hold their feet to the fire. And when something's gone wrong is the only time you're going to hear from them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very interesting. It's sad.
Although
I feel bad
it can go either way. I've also been in a situation where it's like the board is backing the CEO on this move. We know it is, controversial, but we're with him.
Yeah.
Is Gelsinger's replacement going to be able to save Intel?
Well, there isn't one right now.
Hold on, we got Marissa Meyer on the line. What do you think, Marissa?
Could you find somebody that could? It seems like this is a done deal.
Yeah, I know. Well,
what do you mean by save?
Right.
So I'm thinking about General Electric as an example, which was one of the biggest and best companies in the United States. In the recession, it started to collapse. They brought in Jeff, what was his name? But what he did is sold everything off.
Yeah.
GE is now called GE Aerospace, by the way.
Oh,
they sold off most of the divisions, maintained just the aerospace division.
Yep.
And it's a shell of its former self, but it's survived, and actually I think it's doing very well. So.
And there are other divisions, right? Like I worked with GE's with a team at GE that did steam turbines, right?
Yeah, they did locomotives, they did light bulbs. They were in. It was a conglomerate.
Intel could have been a GE, right? They had a good SSD group, they had a good NUC group. They
sold it all off,
right? Because all of those things are low margin business,
or killed them,
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. Is as soon as you turn it into a commercial product, then it's about the lowest price, and they've never been good at that. Their product is a high margin product, the CPU.
I mean, Intel made two big moves this year that I think kind of previewed this situation. The first was pulling Foundry out and operating it as if it were a separate business. They would report those financials separately from the rest of Intel. That business lost several to tens of billions of dollars a quarter, by the way. But but the other one was just, I don't even know how to say this. The other one was basically Pat Gelsinger saying, look, for this thing to make sense as I see it, these two things have to stay intact. And I actually think that the future of this is what we saw when Qualcomm tried to acquire them. And it was like, no, we don't want that. And I think for the money-focused people on the board, it was like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Actually, whatever. Oh, I'm sorry, but the bigger of the two was actually when they wrote down all of the kind of like, I forget it's like real estate associated cost or just asset associated cost of all of their physical assets. Mm-hmm. So in other words, they have all these fabrications. There's a huge cost of trying to upgrade these things or build new ones, but they also are sitting there not doing anything or not doing very much, and they're losing value.
They're underutilized.
So they wrote that stuff down in the quarter, which was one of the reasons why it looked so bad. But he did that in a very transparent and I thought responsible way. But I think it also sets it up for the future where if they do have to divest, whomever acquires that part of the company doesn't get the debt.
All the ingredients in place for the dismantling of the company.
Right. They did the x86 foundation or whatever they call it with AMD and others.
With AMD, yeah.
The whole time it's like, no, we're not breaking up, while taking concrete steps to make that breakup more viable.
So,
as a solution,
the only future I see for the name Intel is like ARM. It's the owner of the licensing of the x86.
So if you were to walk into a Walmart, I don't know, maybe not in the United States, but somewhere in the world, you would find a Polaroid DVD player. Polaroid does not exist really as a company, but it is a brand that has some remote value. And I'm sure they're sticking that name on little instant cameras now too, because what the heck, that's what they're known for. But, I hope it's not that sad.
But the Polaroid is what is to cameras what Intel is to processors, right? They had the digital camera before everyone else, but it was going to eat into their film business, so they didn't release it.
Yeah, Kodak had this exact problem. Right? Yeah, Kodak was very late to the game with digital photography for this reason.
No, Kodak was first to the game. That's the irony of Kodak knew it. They saw it coming. But the business model didn't work.
They had innovator's dilemma.
Innovator's dilemma. They made so much money in film and processing that digital just couldn't support them. But Kodak bought Photo. They had one of the first digital cameras. Right. They were early to digital. It didn't save the company. But I think that's very different from what happened at Intel.
Intel made too many bad choices.
Gelsinger, according to Thompson, Gelsinger, when the board was going to hire him, said, "Look, if you want to, split it up, you should get a different guy. I'm not your guy."
Yeah.
What I want to do, and he laid out the strategy that we just talked about, having a design arm and a fab arm, but keep it all under the same roof. The board, he says, 100% supported it.
I bet and I'm sure
didn't
they
work.
did.
That's all.
I'm sure they
until
did.
The numbers come in, and then it's
right. And then 3 years go by, and it's like, well, this isn't working.
We haven't done anything.
Yeah, they haven't. They talk a lot about hitting milestones, but I don't really see them hitting a lot of milestones. As far as these new process technologies and so forth.
I think you're setting up for an activist board and for a financial CEO that's going to make some unpleasant choices.
Now you get the PE guy. Now you get the guy who's going to split it up.
Yeah, it's going to be
interesting.
Really
evaluate Chainsaw Al Dunlop in there.
Right. Hey, look, it's still firewood, right? I mean, come on, it's worth something.
But the other point here is the longer you go, the less that brand is worth something too.
Right.
So all the more reason to write the ship.
Didn't we have the story? It was a few months ago that Qualcomm was looking at buying Intel. Last week they said,
they were like, just kidding.
No, we don't want
it. But by the way, this may smooth that to happen again. In other words, these smaller, or these parts of the company, which are by themselves smaller and more edible or whatever, may make more sense for another company, right? I mean, the Foundry business by itself may make more sense for some smaller company.
I remember when IBM was going through similar struggles. Dvorak, I said, "Oh, this is over. IBM's gone." Dvorak always said, "No, the patents they own are worth." Yeah. And I'm sure this is true for Intel too.
Yeah.
Make them worth something no matter what, even if all the fabs. And by the way, they just got more than $8 billion from the CHIPS Act.
Yeah.
Well, we say they,
a good
but but listen, that part of the company might be too big to fail. That part of the company might become what Chrysler was in the 1980s, right?
All they do is build chips.
Yeah, the 8 to it's 11 if you include the military part. Well, actually,
it's a huge number.
It's to build fabs in the US, almost 8 plus 3. Well, the 7 point whatever is to build fabs in the United States. Yes, and build and improve existing fabs. Right. But they also got a military contract, right, which might actually be partially or mostly even about chip design. They would want those things to be built in the United States as well, but actually that one might benefit Intel proper, if you will.
So point being, Intel has assets. Intel is not going to dissolve into the ether. No. There's something there.
Yeah, and they might be under different names, right?
Right. I mean, that's what happened with GE. They have an aerospace division. They have a health division. Well, actually, it's not a division anymore. There's 3 separate companies.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me, Leo Laporte. I hope you've enjoyed this little snippet from Windows Weekly. If you want to see more and want to catch the whole show, you can subscribe in your favorite podcast client or visit our website, twit.tv/WW. And of course, there's links right below me.